This session is about Jewish surnames in Eastern Europe, so Ashkenazi surnames. If you have some questions, I'm not a genealogist, just I'm a linguist, so I study the etymology of names, but I never worked in archives except for 1 week I spent in Warsaw when I was preparing my Polish dictionary. But so I have no knowledge about family history of particular families. I have just studied names in sources from 19th century, early 20th century. Often these sources were shared with me by Yad Vashem or by Jewish Gen and other organizations. And so my task is, my interest is to explain last names, first names, and to see a global history, which is called etymology, not history of particular families. But often the explanation of the name gives clues to the family history as well. So this is why I discovered that what is my interest, linguistic interest for satisfying my own curiosity, fortunately it can be of some interest for other people as well. What I prepared a number of slides already, just to give you the frame, and if you have, I included some questions that were asked yesterday or 2 days ago. I incorporated them already in my presentation. If you have some questions, the more they are general, better it is. You can, the best thing I think would be if you can give me a piece of paper with indication. I will look at it and I will see whether I can answer immediately, or maybe I can answer you later by email if you, if I'm not able to answer immediately. In any case, this is my computer, so all my books are here, and I can, of course, make searches just to, if I see where to see. I divided the number of questions that I received already into several topics because I see that some elements are repeated in different inquiries. And what I discovered and what I observed already many years, that many people whose ancestors lived in Eastern Europe believe that one part of their family came from Spain. And so they have some Sephardic roots. In a few cases, it can be true. But in the majority cases, it's just a coincidence between different names. And so we will see just some examples that illustrate this topic. So very recently, I received a request like that. The name is Pius, and the person who was, whose ancestors lived in Ukraine, so the second form, Pius, said me that clearly her ancestors came from Spain, so they are Sephardic. Why? Because we find numerous bearers of the name, of the same name, in a Sephardic community. So, is there any relationship between the Eastern Ashkenazic name Pius and the Sephardic name Pius? They are written exactly the same way, they are pronounced exactly the same way. And indeed, I checked, and now I can speak about Sephardic names, not like just making guesses as an amateur, because I work on Sephardic surnames for already, since I finished my book about the history of Yiddish. I started to work on Sephardic names, and my first book is published already. It concerns North Africa, and currently I'm working on the volume that deals with Italy, Amsterdam, London, Hamburg, and southern France. So I have already a knowledge about Sephardic names, and so I immediately checked. Indeed, Pius will appear as a very common name in the Sephardic community of Amsterdam and London. So this community were formed by former Catholics who came from with Jewish ancestors, who came from Portugal to Amsterdam, to London, where they became open Jews, but they kept their Spanish Catholic name. So Pius is a Catholic name that was continued to use by Jews in Amsterdam without changing their previous name their ancestors received during the conversion. But in Eastern Europe, we have not just Pius, we have also Pine, Pineson, Piles, etc., etc. And Paya was a very common Yiddish female given name. So Pius in Yiddish means just son of Paya. And so this is why it is really a totally independent name, common enough as many other names that are derived from the female first names in Eastern Europe. So why these names are exactly the same? It is a pure phonetic coincidence. We have just 4 letters. All of these letters are quite usual, and we have many, many cases like that when words from different languages, from different culture, are exactly the same or very close, and this is really a pure coincidence. Just to give you an example that I found of the longest name with coincidence. In Spain, in Morocco, there is a name Chikatela, or Chikatila. And Ukraine, where was the most famous, actually, in the Soviet Union, serial killer, whose name is Chikatila. And he is not of Spanish Jewish origin. He is Ukrainian Christian. You see, it's H sound. Chikatilo, 4 syllables. Total coincidence, because Chikatilo in Spanish it's mean quite small, tiny. Chiquito, Chikatilo, and in Ukrainian Chikatilo is someone who it's from the Ukrainian verb chikatati, and Chikatilo is someone who is making things like that. So it's total coincidence. 8 sounds, 4 syllables. And so how find cases, how can we deal with such cases? How can we say whether it is coincidence or really a related name? For me, is the longer the name, the smaller are the chances, of course, of coincidence. For example, if we see a Jewish name from Ukraine, Dermbarembetiker, and if we find another Dermbarembetiker in any part of the world, we can be sure that it is still the same name. You can imagine that it's difficult to imagine so many letters and so unusual combination to be totally independent. But of course, the longer the name, the smaller the chances of coincidence. But still, there are short names that still cannot be a result of coincidence, because in these names some sounds or sounds combinations are totally unusual. It's not a Jewish example, but Georgian, not from Georgia in the United States, but Georgia in Caucasus. There is a Georgian name, Cheidze. You can try to pronounce it. So if I will find someone called Cheidze in the United States, I will be sure that it is of Georgian origin. The name is not very long, but the combination of ch, h, z is quite peculiar. So in this case, you can not have any coincidence. But pi is it's a small name, just 4 letters. All sounds are quite usual, so this is why we have this coincidence of these 2 names. Some other examples. I found it on some internet sources. Often when people describe the origin of one of the most important Yiddish writer of the 20th century, Yitzhak Leibush Peretz, it is often said that he had Sephardic ancestors. He himself never wrote about that. And of course, his native language was Yiddish. Why people say that it is Sephardic? Just because Perez is a common Spanish name. But in this case, it has nothing to do with Spain. Perez is also a biblical male name that was used by Jews in different communities, including Ashkenazi community. In case of Ashkenazi Jews, we have Perez, we have Perezov, Perezovich, etc. So it's a first name from the Bible, and it is a quite coincidence that it sounds very close to Spanish name Perez. One of my correspondents who was working, Kevin Allen Brook actually, when he was working on his paper about Sephardic name in Galicia, he asked me several questions by mail, and he said he found a name Kostro in eastern Poland, and he says it sounds very close to Sephardic Castro. And he asked me, do I think it can be related to Castro? What I did, I asked him in what, actually I checked on Jewish Gen where exactly the name was present. So it was present in the Shedlce gubernia. Then I opened the gazetteer, the most detailed gazetteer of Eastern Europe, and I found a village Kostri exactly in the same place. So for me there is no doubt that the name Kostro comes from the local village in eastern Poland, and it just again we have a coincidence because the name is small, all sounds are usual. Another example of coincidence, in Lithuania there is a name Lelouch, and actually in France currently it is one of the most common Jewish names. It's the name of a cinema maker, one person who is really famous in the world of cinema, and many, many others. All these people, they came from Algeria and from Tunisia. So can we say that Lelouch near Kovna is also of North African origin? So when I was writing my Russian book, again, I do the same thing. First of all, I check all the places, geographic places around the area where the name is found. And actually there is a village Lelouch near Kaunas, near Kovna. So the name in this particular family, of course, has nothing to do with North Africa. It's just a name from local village near in Lithuania. And again, 5 sounds, Lelouch, again, a total coincidence. Rappaport, very well-known name, and you can find in many sources people say it is Sephardic, and there are different versions about from where it comes, because port sounds like Porto, so it's a second after Lisbon city of Portugal, and so what is Rapa? Some people say it is from Rabbi, just deformation. Others say it's from Rofe, Hebrew, which is physician. But actually, these are just guesses. If we look into the family history, and for rabbinical dynasty, we know their family histories from, because we were really, for them, their family history was important. So we actually find that the family is purely Ashkenazi from northern Italy. First of all, it appears like Rapa without port. Rapa is a family that came from Nuremberg to northern Italy in the Middle Ages. The Rapa was a well-known name in Germany, and actually in local dialect of German it means raven, and it was used as a sign, a family sign. So the image of the bird raven was used for centuries by this family, and then they came from Germany to Italy. Some of their branches started to use the name Port or Porto because they lived in the town called Porta in Italy. And at some moment, the two branches of the same family, this is a priestly family, so we are Kohanim, and every time we find Rapa, it's Rapa HaKohen, or Porto HaKohen, so it's really the same family. And one member of this family in 14th or 15th century took the two parts, the raven from German plus the town in Italy they lived, and created the name Rappaport. And then this family migrated with numerous other rabbinical families, Ashkenazi rabbinical family, from northern Italy to Eastern Europe. Another family, Padua, it's exactly the name of the city in northern Italy. Is it really Sephardic, and is it related to Italy? It is really related to Italy, but it is not Sephardic because in northern Italy, between the 13th and 16th century, almost all Jews were Ashkenazic. And it was Sephardic Jews started to come from Spain after expulsion after 1492, but they came not to northern Italy, they came to Rome, to Naples. They never came to the northern Italy. And then 100 years later, former Catholics started to come from Spain in order to become open Jews, exactly as it was the case in Amsterdam, London, and Hamburg. They were coming to Venice, to Livorno, but this family is well known. It was a Katzenelnbogen family from northern Italy, who came from Germany to northern Italy, and then they lived. Mayor Katzenelnbogen was the chief rabbi of Padua, and then his descendants migrated to Belarus, so Brest. We used the name Katzenelnbogen, but at the beginning of 19th century, when Russian authorities asked all Jews to choose a fixed name, one member of the Katzenelnbogen family chose the name Padua because of the city where his ancestors lived. So the name started just in the 19th century, but it reminds about the past in North Italy of this family. It's not Sephardic again, but it is really related to Italy. And the name Padua, it comes from the Polish name of this city, because in Polish you really say Padua for this Italian city. So here we had some illustration. Of course, there are some families with really Sephardic roots, but in my dictionary of Russian Jewish surnames, there are more than 70,000 names. In the dictionary of Polish surnames, there are about 32,000 names. In Galicia, about 30,000 names. In all of this dictionary, and also in the dictionary by Lars Menk about German Jews, if we forget about Hamburg, that was an important Sephardic community, in all other places, we find maybe 20 names of really Sephardic origin, not more. It does not mean that all Jews who lived in this area had no Sephardic ancestors. Some of their ancestors could be Sephardic, but if they were coming from the Ottoman Empire or through Italy to Eastern Europe, if they were, and they were not coming in the 19th century, if they were coming, it was before. If it was before, they were coming to the community that were not using surnames at all. And so if even these people with Sephardic origin were coming, they were losing their surnames. And so don't make a confusion between origin of ancestors and surname. Surname is something that starts for a large majority of Ashkenazi Jews in the turn of 18th and 19th century. And not the surname does not really indicate the origin of the family before 19th century, except for some cases like Padua, but these are the exceptional cases because these are rabbinical dynasties. So age of surnames is really important to understand the etymology. For example, I took it from one, very recently I have seen it in one journalist who was he was writing a paper about origin of Jewish surnames in Eastern Europe. And there was a sentence like that, Katzenelnbogen, that indeed in German means cat's elbow, and Axelrad, that means it's a combination of strange combinations, shoulder plus wheel. The journalist said that these are surely names that were derogatory, contemptuous, that was assigned to Jews by Austrian or Prussian clerks. Can it be true? Absolutely not, because Katzenelnbogen is a well-known rabbinical family, and it was known well before the Austrian clerks started to assign surnames. So. And we know that the family came to North Italy from the town of Katzenelnbogen in Western Germany. So it's not, maybe the town name in some way is related to the German expression, but the Jewish surname has nothing to do with cat or with elbow. It's really origin from the town which is called Katzenelnbogen in Eastern Germany. And what about Axelrod? Because it's also a common name in the form Axelrad, Axelrod, Axelrud. If we look into the books with, that speak about Jewish first names used already in the Middle Ages, we find a male personal name, Axelrad, and it was used from Middle Ages in various Ashkenazi community in Germany and northern Italy as a vernacular substitute for the Shem HaKodesh Alexandre. So you see the link between the two. There are some letters that changed their place, but why Alexander produced, why several letters were exchanged, nobody knows. But in any case, we know for sure that it was a real first name used by Ashkenazi Jews since the Middle Ages. And then in some family, at some moment, Ashkenazi Jews ceased to use this name as a first name. And at that moment, some family, certainly a rabbinical family, retained it as their family name. And so this family name, coming from the first name, appeared already before the 19th century, and so when at the moment of the mass assignment of surnames, Jews took surnames in different parts of Eastern Europe. Many descendants of this family, or maybe several families, took the surname Axelrod. Again, it has nothing to do with shoulder, it has nothing to do with will. It's a coincidence, first name derived from Alexandre. Another story, and I read it in memories of one American physician whose name is Gordon, and he describes his life in Lithuania at the beginning of 20th century, before his family came to the United States. And there is a chapter where he speaks about the origin of the name. And he say, there was a Lord George Gordon, who was a British politician of Scottish noble descent, who converted to the Orthodox Judaism. So this is factual. This person really existed. And this person, at his time, he was very famous because it was Ger Tzedek. He was a true proselyte to Judaism. So he became a very devout Jew, and he also visited Eastern Europe. This is also factual. So can the name be related to his visit, or can the bearers of this name be his descendants? Absolutely not. Why? Because there is a problem with the time. Aaron Gordon was a court physician of the Polish king well before the Lord Gordon was born. And then there is also another physician from Poland who came, as I said, Padua was a predominantly Ashkenazi community, and with a very important medical academy. And so many physicians from Poland, Lithuania, but not only, many from the Ottoman Empire as well, so Sephardic, we were coming to study. And we have lists of all students who were in Padua. And Yekutuel ben Leib Gordon from Eastern Europe was there, again, you see, 30 years before Lord Gordon was born. So here we have clear example of when the age of the surname is particularly important to see that the folk etymology, which was very nice, very romantic, but it cannot be true in this case. So what is the origin of this name? It's clearly a change of letters in the town or city name Grodno. So why some family already in 17th century, for what reason they choose to be called Gordon rather than Grodno, nobody knows. But at any case, it is from the Grodno and Vilna area, so everything corresponds in time, in place. Another topic, and I will be, and many people often say that in their surnames, numerous, and for numerous surnames I have heard or read that people say that some Jewish elements are actually hidden in their surnames. There is some allusion to something Jewish. And these examples, I took them from the book by Benzion Kaganov. So he says that Eckstein, which really means cornerstone in German, it is an allusion to one verse in Psalms, so from the Bible, and Meersand, which means literally in German sand of the sea. It is a quote from Genesis. Can it be true? Who knows? But what is really important, it is to see when and where these names appeared. And actually they appeared, names like that, they appeared in Austrian Empire, and the same Austrian Empire, Galicia, mainly in Galicia, in the same places where people received names like Eckstein, there were many other names ending in Stein. So Goldstein, Silberstein, Rosenstein, and Eckstein as well. And it is one of the large series of names. And similarly for Meersand, there are many names ending in, starting with C, Meer, and ending with Sand, which is sand. And in this area, names were assigned by Austrian clerks. Do you think really Austrian clerks will open the Bible, find the Genesis, and then give the names because of that? I don't think so. But what we cannot exclude, when these people were assigning names, we were also having the first names of Jews who presented themselves for their surname and sign. So if someone was called Meir, we cannot exclude that the clerk chose to call him Meersand because of the beginning. And we have really a very large number of names in Austria or in Russian Empire that starts with Hirsch, for example, Hirschberg, Hirschfeld, Herschberg, Herschfeld, etc., etc. Why? This is clearly in some way related to the very common first name, Hirsch. And so in some cases, indeed, there are allusions who the names was chosen because his first part correspond to the Yiddish first name, but it is not the general rule. And in every case, we need to see genealogical data to check whether it is true or not, with allusion. There are for German Jews there are many names, many Jews having the surname Kahn, Schiff, and you see the two spelling of the name Kahn, Kahn and Kahn. And I have read that with surnames Kahn and Schiff can reveal the priestly origin, while the surname Kahn can correspond to Levite family. Is it true? Usually, how can we check it? So why the first of them would correspond to Kohen? Because you see exactly the same consonants, K, H, N. And the last one, Kahn with two N, why can it be related to Levites? Because in German, Kane means jug. And so this is the symbol of the Levites. As the symbol of Kohanim is hands, blessing hands, the symbol of Levites is jug. So indeed, in these cases, the relations can exist. And I checked in the book by Lars Menk, for example, for Germany, a number of bearers of the name Kahn are indeed Kahn, the last one with two N, Kahn Halevi. So some of them are indeed Levite, and they choose this name because of the symbol. But the oldest family from Frankfurt that had his house signed with the picture of jug, we know their family story, they were not Levite. So we choose it for why we choose the house sign jug, not because we were Levite, but by some other reason. And Schiff, also from Frankfurt, with the family from Frankfurt, is indeed of their Kohanim. So apparently, both a Schiff, these are very close semantically words. So the first of them, Khan, is clearly a Kohanic name. So Jews choose this name not because it is means boat in German, but because it is a normal German word, but at the same time it's quite apparent that it is related to Kohen. And in some family, boat, Schiff, with almost this, so there was a picture of ship, and so the family indeed can be of Kohanic origin, but not all Schiff are Kohanim, and as I said, not all Khan with 2N are Levites. So again, we cannot just from the surname say whether it is from the surname. We cannot deduce without ambiguity the origin or priestly or Levite origin of the family. Just a few last. I grouped some other requests in monogenetic and polygenetic surnames. Everybody knows what is polygenetic, monogenetic. No, so we say, for example, Levi is clearly not. It's clearly polygenetic. Polygenetic means that bearers of the name, if we go up and find their ancestors, we will find at least two families, but several families. So we are not descendant from the one for a father. But monogenetic means that someone took the surname and all bearers are direct descendants of this person. So monogenetic, mono, you see mono, it's just one person, and every bearer of his name, if the family is monogenetic, in this case we can say that the family name is monogenetic. Polygenetic, several independent branches. How can we judge whether a name is polygenetic or monogenetic? There are some clues, of course. For example, if the name is Schneider, we can be sure that it is polygenetic because Schneider just means tailor. And of course, there were not just one tailor in Eastern Europe at the moment of assigning a surname. So for someone called Wilner, that means just Uvilensky, that means just one from Vilna. Of course, we were not just one person, a Jew living in Vilna. But if a name comes from a very unusual word, from a very unusual place, or it is very old, like I mentioned already some monogenetic names. Katzenelnbogen is monogenetic, Padua is monogenetic, Axelrod can be monogenetic. I'm not sure, but it can be. Pais is clearly not monogenetic because there was a family in Grodno, another family in Bessarabia. For both of them, this is clearly polygenetic names in the sense that what was their common element? One of their foreign mothers' first name was Paya, but the family was different. Pais were independent. And so a question concerning Adler. And so the person wrote me, during the 19th century, all my ancestors lived in Eastern Europe, and I read that Jews bearing this name were known in Frankfurt since at least the beginning of 17th century. From this, I'm making conclusion that at some moment my forefathers migrated from Frankfurt to Eastern Europe. Is the logic correct? To answer to this question, we need to think, is this name monogenetic or polygenetic? Adler is an extremely common name, and it was taken in many independent families in Eastern Europe, along with many Adler means just eagle in German and in Yiddish. And we find numerous other names derived from bird names in Eastern Europe. So clearly many families took this name totally independently. And for one particular family, we cannot say without genealogical research whether their ancestors came from Frankfurt or not. So globally speaking, the logic is not correct, of course, but it does not mean that the family does not come from Frankfurt. maybe in this particular case they come, but globally speaking, the answer is no. In a large majority of cases, the name was assigned for the first time at the beginning of 19th century, end of the 18th century, in Russia or in Galicia. Another question, but the name was Austerlitz. It's known from general history that there was a famous battle of Napoleon against Russians and Prussians near this town of Austerlitz in what is now Czech Republic. It's not called Austerlitz now because it's how it has a Czech name, but Austerlitz was the German name of this town. So does this mean that bearers of this name, one of their ancestors, participated in the Battle of Austerlitz? What is really important is the date, 1805. And if we look in Prague cemetery, the name is known 2 centuries before this battle. So people, they just came from the same town, and of course there no link at all with the Napoleon. And it's possible that the name is monogenetic, but every Austerlitz comes from Prague. There was a question concerning yesterday concerning the name Wallenrod. The name appears on a document in Latin letters, and the family was from Kherson from Kherson. Very strange name. I checked this morning in my dictionary, in my database. The name is present. It appears like that, not with W, but with V at the beginning. But exactly the same name, because in my dictionary from the Russian Empire, what is the spelling I'm using? It's just a transliteration from Russian Cyrillic letters to English. And Wallenrod is a transliteration from Russian to German. And people who came to United States from the Eastern Europe, usually they came, if they came not from the Soviet Union, but they came from the Russian Empire, they came having their name written in the passenger list. In the passenger list, these passenger lists were compiled already in Europe. And they were compiled in different cities like Antwerp or Hamburg, or different cities from Western Europe. And from what was the spelling chosen in this passenger list? The spelling came from the Russian foreign passports that were issued in Russia for people who were leaving Russia or Poland. And at that time, there was a tradition to transcribe names from Cyrillic to Latin alphabet using the German spelling. So why? This is why all Jews coming to America from the Russian Empire, their name looks like German names because they were transcribed from Cyrillic Russian to Latin characters in German. And so, of course, Wallenrod in my dictionary and Wallenrod with W in the United States, it's exactly the same name, it's just different transcription. But the name is clearly monogenetic. It does not appear anywhere else. And what could be its origin? Actually, very strange, I found that there was a Konrad von Wallenrod, a medieval knight, Grand Master of the Teutonic Knights. How can it be related to Jewish family? Was maybe one clerk. This person is well known in Eastern European history, but not for Jews, because he had nothing Jewish in the story of this master of Teutonic Knights. What I also found, there was a poem written by the most important Polish poet Adam Mickiewicz, which is called Konrad Wallenrod. It is a poem about this knight, so it's a historical poem. it is one of the most important poems in Polish poetry. And it was published in 1828. So in order to see whether there is any link between this name of this poem or the name of directly this knight, we need to find documents from the Slutsk district to see whether it was, the name was present before or after the publication of the poem. So if it was after, there are some chances that maybe some Polish clerk decided to give the name to the Jewish family in honor of, I don't know. Really here, I don't know why. I don't think it is a coincidence. The name is long enough, and in Polish, the name of this German knight, it is Wallenrod, really Wallenrod. So I cannot say whether from what is the relation, but these are some hints. So these are the list of things I prepared. If you have some questions concerning names, last name, first name in Eastern Europe, if you can maybe ask me like that or give me concerning the name Schneerson. Of course, Schneerson means son of Schneer, but what is the origin of Schneer itself? It's a first name. It's very curious first name in the sense that it is written from the Middle Ages like as if it were a Hebrew name. It's written like a combination of Hebrew words, Schnee-Ur, that means two light. Not two lights, but two and singular light. Of course, this combination is morphologically incorrect. But it's just, again, a coincidence between Hebrew words to light and the actual origin. Actual origin, the name appears in Spain, in southern France, from southern France to northern France, and from northern France to West Germany, and from West Germany to Eastern Europe. And it comes from the Spanish or French word seigneur. So it's a senior. And this first name was actually used not only by Jews, by Spaniards, Catholics as well, but for Jews it became, for some reason, a very common first name already in the Middle Ages in Western Europe, and then it came to Eastern Europe, and so it's really coming from senior. Senior, it has nothing to do with fifth light. The last name, Wigdorczyk. Wigdorczyk is a name from Eastern Europe. In this case, there is a root Wigdor, which is a first male first name, which is a diminutive of Avigdor, from biblical Avigdor. A Chik means, in this case, son of, it's a diminutive in Belarusian and Russian, but Wigdorczyk means just son of Avigdor. Question. According to the genetic studies, 40% of Epstein are related, and the other choose the surname in the 19th century. This example is, I think, globally true for all names what I call rabbinical. So not only for Epstein, it's also true for Horowitz, for Shapira, for Shor, Landau, Auerbach. So all this family, Margolis, Margulis, all this family were about between 20 and 30 names that correspond to rabbinical dynasties. And these are the only names that existed in Eastern Europe before the end of 18th century, because all other Jews had no surnames, but these families were very, for them their origin, their iches was extremely important, and so we continued from generation to generation to use this name. But when we were using this, and then, so at the moment, there were laws that were forcing Jews to take hereditary fixed names. The number of bearers of this name was already large. And why it was large? Because this rabbinical dynasty existed for already centuries. It was very prestigious to be Epstein, or Rappaport, or Joffe, or Shapira, Horowitz. And so if someone was descending from these families, there were big chances that the person was choosing the name at the beginning of 19th century. This does not mean that he was descending from this family by his paternal line. Because even before the assignment of surnames, I have seen in the rabbinical biographies cases when someone was taking name, rabbinical name, not from his father, but from his mother, or even from his wife. So we don't. So there is some relationship, but if genetic studies are done, if they are done focused on the Y chromosome, so paternal line, in this case, of course, we will not find the match, but not for all of them. But now, if people say that a large number of people who bear these names were actually acquired them in the 19th century and they had no relationship at all to this family, I have seen this also said, because this was a prestigious names, I don't think this scenario is plausible, because I can hardly see how in a shtetl where everybody knows what family is priestly, what family is Levite, I can hardly see if, say, my ancestor would take, who was not related to any of these families, and he decides, for example, to be called Horowitz. I can hardly see, taking into account the mentality of people, how can this event be possible? I think if someone took the name Horowitz, he was really related to the Horowitz family, and someone who took the name Margolis, he was really related to this family, not necessarily by paternal line, but in some way. Otherwise, people around who would not appreciate that someone is taken. Can you imagine someone who say, I'm Cohen, if he is not really Cohen? This is difficult to imagine. Now, when they came to the United States, they could do everything, of course. And I read already family stories about someone who is coming from Russia and having a name, Slavic sounding name like Krasnoselsky or Sapozhnikov or something like that, and then take in the United States during the moment of naturalization, not on Ellis Island, of course, but later, a good sounding American Jewish name like Goldberg or Epstein or Rosenfeld. So these cases exist, but this is already in the United States. In Russia, when people were taken their surnames, they were taken their surnames living inside of the traditional society, traditional family, traditional community. So they could not take any name they wanted. An example, family name Goldsmith, and in Europe it was Goldschmidt, of course. The father was born in Ukraine, and he was a goldsmith. We believe that father was born in the middle of the 19th century, and does the name suggest Germanic roots? Was it just an acceptable occupational name to adopt when the Tsar required surnames? If people lived in 19th century in Eastern Europe, at that time there was no migration from Germany to Eastern Europe. So that means that they took already the name being in Eastern Europe. and Goldschmidt is not a name that was used by rabbinical family. So that means that the name was created in Eastern Europe, and there is no reason to believe that it came from Germany. The family, of course, could come from Germany, but maybe several centuries before. But the name itself, it appeared only in the 19th century. It was clearly taken by someone whose occupation was a goldsmith. And this occupation in German is Goldschmied, in Yiddish Goldschmied. If the name was written in the German way, there are several reasons for name written in the German way with the DT at the end. One is if people were from the Galicia. In this case, the name were recorded by Austrian clerks whose native language was German. And of course, they were written their names in the German way, in German spelling. But even in this is also true for the northwestern part of the Russian Empire, which is Courland, so what is now part of Latvia, and in Riga, for example, itself. So in Latvia until 1893, the official language was German, not Russian. And it was only in 1893 that the language of official documents in Latvia became Russian. So during the time the name were taken, they were spelled not in Cyrillics, but they were spelled in German. And of course, German clerks has written them in the German way. But now, if even we consider Ukraine, for example, southern Ukraine, eastern Ukraine, even in that area, people could write the name in the German way because they were considering that Yiddish is a corrupted German. And so they were correcting Yiddish to German. It is for that reason that we have numerous Rosenberg, a very few Rosenberg. In Yiddish, Mountain of Rose would be Rosenberg. But in German, Rosenberg, and Jews and other people were, generally speaking, were considered until the maybe mid-20th century that Yiddish is a bad German. So, of course, when they were writing their names, they could correct German. And so if your name sounds German, it does not mean that it was taken in Germany. Very unusual name, Finkelstein. It is there is something strange in this name, because it is quite common name, of course, in Ukraine, in Galicia. But what is really unusual is that in Galicia, usually, the names are taken from German. And in German, Finkelstein means nothing. And only in Yiddish, it is a sparkling stone. So it's a nice name. But what is really strange, that it is really Yiddish pronunciation, Finkelstein, because in German it would be Funkelstein, or Funkenstein. This form exists as well, but for some reason, really, the Yiddish form became the most common in Galicia, in Ukraine. And so this is one of the examples of name which is not really German, but really Yiddish. Maybe what we can be true, maybe initially some Austrian clerk assigned a name in its German form, but one generation later it was already changed to the Yiddish sounding. But it's some families it could be true, but it cannot be true for all families. So, or maybe where Austrians, in Austrian pronunciation, it is also possible that some Austrian dialectal German peculiarity, they are similar to what we find in Yiddish. So maybe in Austrian dialect it also sounds like that. A question. Sverzhensky and Goldberg married in Minsk. Origin of choosing name. Is it reasonable to trace Sverzhensky to Poland prior to earliest one so far found in Minsk? And Goldberg, is it reasonable to try to find family in a German-speaking area when name was taken? Actually, for Goldberg, I just answered it when I explained you concerning Goldschmidt. Exactly the same explanation goes for Goldberg. Now for Sverzhensky. If a person is from Minsk, I'm just looking at my dictionary. And so you see, I will make it much bigger. No. Well, in any case, Sverzhensky was a name found in Novogrudok, Slutsk, and Minsk districts, so from the same general area. And this area where was a shtetl called Sverzhen near Minsk. So when we see Sverzhensky from Minsk, there is no doubt about the origin of the name. The name appeared really in this place. It was taken by someone who came from this shtetl and who came from Sverzhen to Minsk and took the name according to the place of origin. So nothing. So we cannot trace him to Poland. We trace him to the same place where we found the name in Belarus. Of course, this part was part of Poland before the partition of Poland, but the names were taken already after the partition. So it was already in Russia, in what is now called, in the part of the Russian Empire which is called now Belarus. Another example of change in the United States. So the name was Deutsch, pronounced Deutsch, and in the US it became Deutsch. So written in Eastern Europe it was written like in Polish, and in the United States it became written like in German. So what is Deutsch? What is the language for Deutsch? It is Yiddish. In Yiddish, German is Deutsch, Deutsch. So, but when people came to the United States, having some name spelled in Polish, of course it's really so if you will spell it this way in the United States, you will have some difficulties for people to read with CZ at the end, and of course the spelling like that is much more appropriate because this is a correct German. So again, people correct name from the Yiddish, which was considered to be incorrect, to German. So do you think the family could have come from Germany prior to arriving to Surnames, Belarus? So why people could take the name Deutsch, so meaning German? Most likely they really came from some German province. But when is it really the person who took the name? I doubt it, because during that period there was no migration anymore. Maybe a few generations before, maybe 18th century, also it depends what we call Germany. After the first partition of Poland, what was formerly Poznań province of Poland became part of Prussia. And what was also another part of Poland became West Prussia. So people coming from these former Polish territories, they could, I think, also acquire this nickname. Maybe it could also be a nickname acquired by someone who was fluent in German. So this is really, we can only guess what is really sure, that the name comes from the Yiddish word meaning German. Now, for what reason people took this name, this is another story, and without really guessing, and I prefer not to guess, we cannot say really something reliable. Okay, I think we will stop here. Thank you for your attention.